Well, joining me now is former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor of Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. You know him well. Mick, thanks for coming on the program. Mick, before we get into anything else, though, there's been some extraordinary scenes this week at a hearing where Joe Biden's personal physician took the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination when he was asked questions in testimony to the House Oversight Committee about Joe Biden's condition. Here's a little bit of that.
Were you ever told to lie about the president's health?
On the advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer based upon the physician-patient privilege and in reliance on my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. I am not a lawyer. I must follow my lawyer's advice in this matter.
Did you ever believe the president was unfit to execute his duties as president?
On the advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer based on the physician-patient privilege and in reliance on my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. I'm not a lawyer, and I must follow my lawyer's advice in this matter.
Mick, this absolutely stinks. We've spoken about it before. The more we find out about it, the more it feels like this is 10 times worse than Watergate. What is your take on this testimony from this doctor? Because at least one of those questions was not about Biden's condition. It was about whether he was asked to lie. So he can't hide behind the veil of patient-doctor confidentiality here, can he?
Yeah, James, there you go. And a lot of folks have missed that. Keep in mind, under most circumstances here, doctors can't be forced to testify in this country about their patients' health. You're not allowed to do that. It's sort of like asking a priest what he heard in the confessional. We just don't do that. But the question that he got asked, and you played it just there, specifically about was he asked to lie? That has nothing to do with Joe Biden's health. And he took the fifth on that. You're allowed to take the Fifth Amendment privilege here in this country if you believe the testimony could lead to your own criminal conviction or criminal charges and so forth. What about that question encouraged this guy or made this guy think he needed to take his Fifth Amendment privileges? That's fascinating to me. Now, here's the next piece of the puzzle. Under our system, if you receive a pardon, okay, if you have no fear of criminal prosecution, you are not allowed to invoke your Fifth Amendment privileges against self-incrimination, which means that if Donald Trump issues a pardon to this doctor, he will have to testify. And if he doesn't testify, he can go to jail. Keep in mind, even though this is not a court, it's just Congress. Steve Bannon went to jail for refusing to testify to Congress. Peter Navarro went to jail for refusing to testify to Congress. If they give this guy, this doctor, a pardon and he still doesn't testify, he can and probably would go to jail. So I think this story is just beginning. That was by far the most fascinating exchange. I was wondering why they have the guy in there because he can't talk about his patient's health anyway. But did you lie to Congress? Taking the fifth on that one, did you lie to anybody about his health? That is a big deal, and I think the story is just getting started.
Well, yeah, and I mean, doesn't this then flow into all the other things we've spoken about, including the great Autopen question, which Donald Trump keeps insisting is a big deal. And you know how sometimes with Trump, something that seems a little bit off, he says is a big deal. It does turn out to be a big deal because who told him to lie and who was actually running the country?
That's exactly where this is going. Keep in mind, what I think is going to happen is that the Department of Justice is going to go find one of the people, for example, that was pardoned via Autopen. And they're going to charge that person with whatever they might be able to charge them with, whatever an investigation reveals and so forth. And then that person will then say, well, you can't charge me, Department of Justice, because I have this pardon. And then they're going to legally fight about whether or not the pardon was valid. And Joe Biden's mental state and whether or not somebody else was running the Autopen was absolutely relevant to that sort of question. So again, this is just the tip of the iceberg here. I think this is going to be 2 or 3 years. You'll see this run out through the rest of the Trump administration. What exactly was Joe Biden's mental condition? And more importantly, who was running the government during his supposed time of incapacity? He signed a bunch of bills into law, including the Green New Deal, the Inflation Reduction Act. He signed a bunch of things. Was that him or was that somebody else? And if it was somebody else, those laws might not be valid.
We are in fascinating territory here, aren't we? But, of course, this will wind up probably at some point in the Supreme Court, which I want to come to next because there's been another win for the White House in the Supreme Court, which has now given it more power again to resume its goal of reshaping and scaling back federal agencies because the president, according to the Constitution, who knew, has the power over federal agencies. Tell us about this decision, what it means, and is this an end to the lawfare that has been going on for the past 6 months from the left, trying to hobble everything that Trump does by finding these little district court judges to go and knock it down, and then it has to go through layers and layers and layers of jurisdiction?
Yeah, I don't think this case is as impactful on that as the case just a couple of weeks ago about national or universal injunctions. I think that really cut the legs out of the Democrats trying to sort of thwart the Trump agenda at every step of the way through the court system. But this case is impactful in another way and for another reason. You just flashed that Newsweek headline, and it's fascinating to sort of read between the lines to read that one. This was an 8-1 decision, James. This was not a 6-3 decision. This was not a partisan decision. 2 of the 3 liberal judges actually said, you know what, this is the right decision. That's fascinating to me. Anytime we can get an 8-1 or a 9-0 decision in this country right now, that is noteworthy in and of itself. So I think what the court simply said, and they're probably right on this, they should be right, the chief executive officer of the country should be able to be the chief executive officer. And sometimes that means firing people. That means that in every other walk of life. Why doesn't it mean it in Washington? And as of this week, it does. The president's authority to fire people will be expanded, and I think rightly so.
Well, it's all right there in Article 1 of the Constitution for anybody at home who wants to go and have a look at that. Hey, also need to talk a bit about some of the tariff stories that have been going around this week. And the Wall Street Journal has revealed that there's been a lot of tension, I think, within the White House over what goes on and when the tariffs come into play. There's been this report in the Wall Street Journal that Trump decided to delay the implementation of reciprocal tariffs to August 1st after advisors, including Secretary Scott Bessent of the Treasury, said he would get better deals with more time. How does this give us a window into what's happening around that tension between Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick over how hard to go and on whom with these tariffs? We've seen protests in Brazil. They're causing a lot of chaos all over the place.
Bessent is winning, generally, is the answer to that question. Look, it's hard to cut trade deals. They're very complicated things. I don't think, Trump famously said we'll do 90 deals in 90 days, and they haven't done really any. I think they've got 2 or 3 done on sort of a letter agreement, a memorandum of understanding, sort of a summary deal, but they haven't done any major deals by any stretch of the imagination. And I think Bessent's request just reflects reality, which is these are very, very complicated things to do. I think Scott Bessent now is probably one of the more powerful members of the cabinet. The president relies on him. I think the president understands that Bessent understands the markets in a way that, say, Peter Navarro, another senior advisor and a more protectionist advisor, just simply don't understand. I think that's probably the smart play. If I was in the White House, I'd be encouraging the president to listen to Bessent more than somebody like Peter Navarro for sure. So, but again, I don't know why it's news that they need more time to do a bunch of deals, because these deals are very, very complicated.
Yeah, they are, but I do think you're right about Scott Bessent, that he is really one of the biggest brains in that operation, and I think if you go back and look at some of his speeches, they're quite fascinating. But before I let you go, Mick, also just on the deal-making side here, there's a lot of tension here in Australia about aren't we going to get a deal? What's our prime minister going to do about all this? New details have emerged this morning of Kevin Rudd and President Trump having a secret meeting. Kevin Rudd, of course, is the Australian ambassador to the U.S., having a secret meeting at the president's International Golf Club in Florida back in January. Now, we don't know anything really about what was said or not said during this. Should Australians read much into the fact that our ambassador did manage to get a meeting with the president, or president-elect, as he happened to be at that point?
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into the word secret meeting. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I've been in that dining room 1,000 times, not 1,000, but 100 times, and it's one of the most least secret places in the whole. It's very public. Trump, it's full. It's actually open to the members of the golf course and so forth. Joe Hockey and I have been in that room together when Trump just sort of walks in, and it's like him walking into any other club on any other given day. But that's probably neither here nor there. Sure. Australia's got an issue. I think they do. I think Kevin is trying hard. But the lack of you're correct to point out this was months ago. This was before Trump was actually sworn in. It's the lack of the ongoing conversation that I think I would be the most concerned about. I don't know why Anthony Albanese seems so unwilling to just pick up the phone and call Donald Trump. I guess he's got the cell phone number now. If not, I'd be happy to give it to him. But Trump believes in principle-to-principle discussions. He doesn't want to work through back channels and subordinates and so forth. So the fact that Trump and Albanese have not had a meaningful, direct conversation, I think would be more impactful right now in my mind than whatever happened at the golf club with Kevin Rudd before the swearing in.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Mick Mulvaney, we're going to have to leave it there. See you next time.